just what is the best mag wheel or chrome polish, mag wheel polish? But more importantly, how do you determine if the mag wheel that you're trying to polish is in fact bare metal or clear coated? And therein lies the problem. So the simple rule is this, that most polishes, and I have two examples here, Flitz and Bright Max. Notice that on the Flitz that it says metal, plastic, and fiberglass polish and paint restore. Now, who would have ever thought that you could get a metal polish that is effective in polishing aluminum or chrome or metal that you can actually use on paint? That seems so counterintuitive. Most people assume that metal polishes are highly abrasive, when in fact they really are not. They have chemicals in them that react to the metal and clean it and brighten it and polish it, but most of them are not aggressive with abrasives or have zero to no abrasives in them at all. So the real question is not how do you do it? Because the simple answer to that is that you make a choice, and below every video there's going to be suggestions of the types of polishes that I recommend, in this case for mag wheels, chrome, metal polishes, call it whatever you want. You start by reading the manufacturer's label, their directions. That's where you start. What I'm going to show you today is a more important question, because there's many ways to polish this wheel. There's attachments to a drill motor you can use. There's little buffing pads that you can use. Ultimately, that's where you, as a car owner or detailer, will have to decide. Often, like buffing a car, you can do the heavy lifting with a type of attachment, a polishing wheel, or whatever. There's different pads, put it that way. So you can do the heavy lifting or the bulk areas that are exposed with a buffer, a polisher, a drill motor with an attachment on it. But then, as a rule, you're always going to be having to finesse the nuances of the wheel by hand anyways. So that's where you'll have to determine the cost-benefit analysis of busting out a machine, taking the time to set it up, or just whipping out a microfiber cloth and just applying lots of elbow grease and the choice of your chrome polish or metal polish. So that's the simple answer. But the more complex question is, how do you in fact determine if that wheel is coated, as in clear coated? Because that is a critical part of the question. So that's what I really want to discuss today, is the more complex part of the equation that I'm asked more frequently than just how to polish a wheel. Usually it's more, hey Darren, how do I tell if the wheel is coated or not? How do I tell if it's bare aluminum or not? Because that will determine whether you can use acid-based wheel cleaners, pH balanced wheel cleaners, whatever. So the simple answer is, if it's uncoated, as in no clear coat, that's where you should not use acid-based wheel cleaners. It doesn't mean it's going to wreck the wheel, but what it's going to do is remove that shine and create a satin appearance to it that you then have to polish back to shine. So yes, it has its place. It's not going to damage the wheel per se, but it will change the appearance. So that's just one of many reasons why we need to understand, how do you tell the difference? So let's get started in determining, how do you tell the difference with different metals, different finishes? So just how do you determine whether your wheels specifically are coated aluminum or bare aluminum? And when it comes to cars, often there will be many types of materials. For example, here we have, and this actually could be a alloy wheel, which means a combination of different types of alloys, or it could be a magnesium wheel. I have no idea. The real question is whether this polished lip here is coated with a clear coat, or if it's bare aluminum or magnesium. Now this is a cast, different type of metal, not polished, and it's not meant to be polished. And here we have even a different type of metal. Is it coated? Is it needing to be polished? Is it intended to be polished? So there's many variables to contend with. So let's look on the inside. Never mind the exhaust pipes. Totally different. That's actually metal that's been coated. Now, whether it's been treated with some kind of ceramic type coating, and I don't mean the ceramic that you put on cars, but a ceramic or a maybe a Cerakote. There's specialized coatings that they can put on exhaust and the manifolds because they have to endure such high temperatures. So here we have another metal that's unique, but what is it coated with or painted with or finished with? Now we go on the inside. And we have the steering wheel, a different type of metal. And you'll notice, for example, up here, we have the chrome housing to the mirror, the front windshield. But then we have the not so shiny part of the steering wheel. Here we have the gauges, the bezel around the gauges, which is chromed. But is that plastic that's been chromed, or is that metal that's been chromed? And does it even matter? Because really what we're dealing with is a type of chrome process. And like everything else in life, not all chrome is created equal. There's very high quality chrome and there's cheap chrome. But the goal as a detailer is to determine how in fact is the most proper and effective way to either polish it, if it needs polishing it, or if it's oxidizing, how do you remove the oxidation and maintain it moving forward? So, once again, how do you determine? Here I have my cloth, microfiber cloth, with my greenish metal polish on it. Now, this test can actually be performed with any kind of polish, whether it has abrasives or not. You can actually do it with your finger if you rub hard enough. So what we're looking for is you rub this lightly at first to see if it's producing any blackness. And so far there's no black. But with that said is these wheels are not heavily oxidized for one. Secondly, they're not heavily degraded as in dull. But I already know that they're not chrome. So they're not going to show up like chrome. I just know that there's some type of polished aluminum. What I'm trying to figure out is, well, firstly, most metal polishes can be used on clear coat because most metal polishes actually don't have true abrasives in them. They're what's called cleaners, as in chemical cleaners. But see how this is turning black as I continue to rub? And I'm actually not putting much pressure. I'm just going back and forth, obviously many times, to create the results that I'm after, and it's the results that will determine if in fact this is a coated or an uncoated aluminum or some type of alloy wheel. See how black that is becoming? Now if this was coated with a clear coat, it would never come up black like that unless you were applying the polish over a heavily dirtied wheel. Then it would be a matter of the dirt showing up as black, not the metal or the oxidation. So aluminum, and I don't know if magnesium responds the same way for sure because I'm not an expert in all types of metals, but this suggests strongly that it probably is aluminum, an alloy aluminum, but what it absolutely tells me is that this is an uncoated wheel. What does that mean to you? Well, one, that you can actually polish it and restore more luster to it, more shine, by polishing more and more and more using either heavier pressure or repeated polishing. So I know that I can polish these wheels to a greater level of shine and luster because they're not coated. If it was coated, at best, all I can do is polish the clear coating on it, move any scratching restore a certain amount of shine, but I'm not actually dealing with the metal itself. I'm at that point dealing with a clear coat, which is very similar to the clear coat that will be on the car itself. Let's go back inside of this badass Cobra, and I will polish this chrome, piece. Now, polishing is just the act of rubbing back and forth. There's many ways to define what polishing actually means. In this moment, it means taking a polish itself, rubbing back and forth, and look what happens. See that? It's still green. It's still the color of the polish versus the black from the wheel. So, and I already know this about chrome. It's never gonna pull up black. The polish itself, the metal polish, will remove oxidation because this car lives at the beach. So it's gonna naturally start to pit and oxidize. So this will clean that up and protect it. Let's see if I can pull in a little bit. Because it's such a thin strip, my camera wants to focus on the background rather than the foreground. So let's try this. So you can see the metal in between and see how polished it is in fact. Now if we start dissecting this car, and this is where communication then enters the picture. You communicating with your customer as to what is needed for the uniqueness of this car. So here we have the bezels. I can polish those, they're chrome, and I can remove some pitting or oxidation that is going to naturally occur as a result of living here at the beach and just being exposed to the the weather. Then we have the steering wheel. And once again, is the steering wheel coated or uncoated? So what I'll do is I will take this section of my cloth that I use to polish the chrome with. And once again, you go lightly at first to try to determine and assess the results. Now this is, I know, made out of aluminum versus any other metal. And aluminum will have a tendency, because it's a softer metal, and look what's happening. See how it's starting to turn black? So that tells us that this aluminum wheel does not have a clear coating on it. And what's challenging about polishing the steering wheel is that because it will be sitting right in front of Johnny customer's face as he's driving, his eyes will be able to naturally scrutinize it without even trying, because he's sitting right in front of the steering wheel. So you have to finesse this moment, because you will, if you choose the wrong cloth, or you become too aggressive in pressure, or you don't know how to finesse the moment, because it will start to reveal the pattern of which you polish. So for example, if I go back and forth this way, but then it butts up to the wood part of the steering wheel, and then I need to get into this tight little crevice here, and I start polishing this way, if you do it hard enough or aggressive enough, you'll see your pattern of polishing up and down versus horizontal through here. So you literally have to polish it and then kind of blend in the areas if that pattern is starting to show up. So back to communication, this is where you have to talk to your customer. So for example, this door latch is chrome. It's gonna naturally oxidize, start showing some pitting, and it needs some protection and restoration, just like the paint needs protection and sometimes restoration. And this is where I would go into context. For example, the context of this moment is the surroundings. And what I mean by the surroundings is the beach. The beach is unique because the weather is unstable, it's very unpredictable, and the weather is unique to other parts of the state itself here in Southern California. So the further inland I go, the less humidity naturally is there. Here at the beach, not only do you have higher levels of humidity, but within that humidity is salt content from the ocean itself. Salt is very corrosive. So that's the context. The content is the car. So if I took this car and let's say it lived out in the city of Palm Springs, which is a desert community here in Southern California, very high temperatures in summer, very low temperatures in the winter, but it's very dry. There's not a lot of moisture in the air. So you need to understand that as a rule, water or moisture is damaging to virtually everything unless you're a human or a plant, because we need water to sustain life. But it's going to corrode. It is nature's most pervasive or prolific solvent. It dissolves things. Okay, so it will attack things and damage them as a rule. So whether it's the paint on your car, metal surfaces, whatever, water in and of itself is already damaging. It will start to dissolve wax or sealants that you've applied to the paint. So when you add water that's already naturally corrosive or a solvent, and you add salt to the equation, it becomes that much more problematic in dealing with it. So if this car lived at the desert, low humidity, no salt in the air, completely different as far as the requirements of maintenance and detailing versus this car that actually lives at the beach, which is subject to the weather here that's unique and filled with lots of moisture and lots of salt. So this is where, once again, you've got to be able to communicate that, you've got to be able to understand that so that you can manage the moment, remain profitable, because you got to know what you're getting into. You've got to be able to educate the customer, because the customer is not going to naturally understand all the variables or nuances of the moment. And this moment dictates uniqueness that's going to be uniquely different to this car if it in fact lived in the desert. So you see how I can take one little subject and just instantly explode it and make it very much more complex. But it's the ability to understand the complexities and the nuances of any moment, of any situation, so that you can reduce it to a much more simplified approach or simplified explanation. So yes, I get very complex in my explanations so that you in your world can then reduce it down to a more simplified strategy and plan of action. And hopefully you can take that, implement it into your own world to become more successful, more profitable. Fill in the blank.